Soapstar quite simply knocks it out the park in almost every department. The game from Brazilian studio Banana Bytes and publisher Red Art Games, who kindly supplied me with my copy, is probably influenced most heavily by Toaplan, but it doesn't just ape the style of that legendary developer, and instead takes that inspiration as a base into which it mixes a few dashes of more modern Danmaku flavourings, while also adding some twists and flourishes that are absolutely all its own. The end result is something that, while undoubtedly its own thing, manages to feel instantly familiar, and offers options galore for every level of skill. I'm just going to give the most basic possible overview of the mechanics initially, for reasons that will become clear in a moment. Those mechanics are that the game gives players two shots, a regular shot that can be fired indefinitely, and a special shot that uses energy from a meter that usually replenishes at a fairly decent clip. The main unique system the game offers is the ability to teleport around the screen, with usage of this being on a cooldown timer. You can also slow your movement speed by holding a button and slow it even further with another. Now, the reason I can't really say too much about your main shots in a simple overview of the game's mechanics is because each of the playable ship's shots are vastly different and majorly mix up the way you play, and there are 9 ships to choose from. One might have a relatively standard straight shot with a beam cannon as its special, while another might fire a thin spread with a single rear shot and launch single powerful energy barrages as its special. Speed also differs between ships, as does the way your teleport functions, with some moving you in your chosen direction, and others, for example, depositing you at a random point on the screen. The teleport and special shot mechanics are a really interesting little variation, as it is almost as if Sophstar deconstructs the usual bomb mechanic by splitting it up into 2 separate parts. With most ships, your special shot is the aggressive, destructive half of a bomb, while the teleport functions as the defensive, escape from harm side of things. What's super impressive here as well is not just the variety of ships and shots on offer, but the fact that even with such variety, no option feels horribly unbalanced. Of course, you will likely find ships that you find easier or more difficult to use, but there's no option that feels instantly either OP or unusable. One ship might feel like it has some super powerful special, but then you'll find it takes ages to recharge or move slowly. For me so far, it's not been a simple question of finding a ship I most prefer and sticking with that, but of giving the game a serious go with many different ships and mixing up the experience, which of course is great for longevity. Not that longevity should remotely be a worry here. The game has 8 stages in its arcade mode, each one pretty lengthy, and if anything I might even say the arcade mode is a little too long to be honest, but not by much, and that is more a matter of personal taste than any sort of problem. However, on top of this arcade mode, which comes with short, snappy story interludes that add some character but can fortunately be easily skipped on repeat plays, on top of that there is a score attack mode, a time attack mode, and an endless mode, all of which do exactly what they say on the tin and which have accompanying online leaderboards. One thing I should mention about the online boards is, on my first play I registered a score with no issue, but ever since I have been getting an error message. Hopefully this is something that will fix itself in the future, but at least for me personally, the boards are currently not functioning at all. So to continue with the modes on offer, there is an unlockable extra mode as a reward for beating the game on any difficulty, and there's also a really excellent mode called Cadet Mode, which offers up 60 short but sweet mini missions that task you with surviving for X amount of seconds or killing Y amount of enemies, your performance rewarding you both with grades and frequently with little unlockables such as new palettes or other cosmetic options for the main game. And those options, by the way, already start off in a pretty nice position. You have the aforementioned palette changes, you have different backgrounds, you have not just Tate mode but the option to adjust the game screen size to whatever your preference is, and it's all done nice and simply through the menus. Now, all this is fine and good, but it would be for nothing if the main game itself weren't up to much, and fortunately again there is absolutely nothing to worry about in this most crucial department. As mentioned, the number one influence here is probably mid-era Toaplan, but Sophstar is by no means derivative and absolutely plays like its own beast. The most crucial thing I think it takes from those earlier arcade days is its pacing. Things are pretty much non-stop from the word go. There are moments where it's more or less intense, but there are very few moments where you can chill out for more than a second. Even when there are only a few enemies, you still have to be constantly on your toes, because even though at points you will see patterns that start ticking up towards Danmaku territory, for the most part you're facing a lot of fast bullets or clusters that barely give you time to think. There are also a nice range of enemy formations, with bursts of popcorn enemies coming in nice lines that allow you the satisfaction of blasting them to smithereens in quick succession, bigger, tankier enemies hanging about in the upper reaches of the screen, and an assortment of mid-bosses and unique enemies in each stage. There are also, especially as you progress further, a number of unique little set pieces, such as the walls that trap you in a space about a quarter of the width of the screen for one fight, and while these moments add, as I'm sure they're designed to, some extra challenge, they all feel challenging in a positive and fun sense, rather than just suddenly artificially spiking the difficulty or introducing anything that feels unfair. There is of course a scoring system on offer as well, and it is a great intuitive combination of a couple of simple systems that work well together to offer plenty of fruitful opportunities while remaining easy to understand. The first system is a nice classic multiplier that goes up to ×9 when you chain enemies in quick succession. As enemies are worth more points in later stages, these multiplier bonuses get meatier the further you get. The other system sees you collect the green gems left behind by enemies, and these decrease in size the longer you leave them. The smaller the gems get, the fewer points they're worth, starting at 1000 and dropping quickly in regular intervals of 100 each time. This is a great system and encourages you to take risks by getting up close and personal with the enemies, so you can point blank them and scoop up the gems the second they appear. Now, when initially putting down my thoughts for this review, I was going to say something along the lines of, great as this is, I did wish there was maybe just a little more complexity to it to reward those who really dig deep, such as having a bigger reward for the largest gem size, which would have massively increased the point ceiling for the most highly skilled players and really separated scoreplay from survival. However, I then discovered the game does indeed have an alternate scoring system, and that is exactly one of the things it does offer. Once again, we see this game really catering to everyone, and it's just great to see. An interesting result of these two systems is that in the early stages, grabbing larger gems is definitely the way to go, but as the value of enemy kills increases as you progress, while the gem values stay the same, your priority kind of dynamically switches through your playthrough. There are also, by the way, floating power-ups that switch between granting points or meter increases, and although there's nothing crazily complex going on here, as the best scoring systems usually do, this one definitely increases that one more go factor that keeps you coming back, and is yet another just really well worked aspect of the game. One other system it is worth mentioning here is the occasional floating question marks you see, which, when collected, fill in slots at the bottom of the screen. I have to be totally honest, I actually do not know what these do, and despite the game having a couple of tutorial options, I can't find any explanation in the game either. If you've already played this and know what is going on here, please do feel free to enlighten me in the comments. Now, in terms of presentation, we already covered the fact there are a host of filters and background options, and a little story that plays out between stages. There are all the player ships too, which don't just play differently, but look very visually distinct as well. Stages start off on the simple side, but there are some more impressive looking backgrounds as you get further in the game, although most do feature repeating patterns rather than seeing you journey across a single set stage. But while this would definitely be one area where there is some room for improvement, I can't really say it hampers things in any way. There are lots of different enemy types on offer as well, and as mentioned, mid-bosses and cool little set pieces too, and even the occasional bit of story occurring through gameplay. Bosses are mostly threatening, and for the most part everything is kept very distinct, and visibility is almost always clean and clear, although some shots can obscure enemy bullets when they get close to your ship. The soundtrack immediately feels fitting, and even though I did like it well enough from the off, it grew on me more and more the more I played, and the different tracks for each stage do a really good job of conjuring up quite different atmospheres. One aspect of the audio I wasn't so keen on initially was the sound of shots striking enemies, but as with the scoring, just as I was about to jot that down in the very short minus column, I discovered there's an option to tone it down, solving the problem completely. And all in all, I really don't have anything overtly negative to say about Soapstar. In terms of visuals, it doesn't reach the heights of some of the true classics, and the scoring system, while great, maybe misses that killer hook to really draw you in deep. But honestly, this is me just scraping around really trying to find criticisms. Overall, I really can't emphasise quite how impressed I was with Banana Bytes' effort here. In terms of visuals, options, scoring, modes, gameplay, pretty much in terms of everything you can ask an indie shmup to give you, Soapstar is either good, very good, or great. It takes bits and pieces from other classic games, but cleverly nods towards them rather than slavishly copying them, and is 100% its own thing. I'd happily give it a 9 out of 10, and especially at its price, I think it's being offered up as an absolute bargain. There will, by the way, be a physical version, and that can already be pre-ordered, and you'd better believe I've already got mine locked in, because this absolutely deserves a lot of attention, and hopefully it's going to get it through these console releases. Let us know your thoughts on the game. It has been out for a while on Steam, where it's already been generating a bit of buzz, and thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Cheers.